So today I am going to be talking about something that I feel like I find very often in YA books, and that is the miscommunication trope. The miscommunication trope is when two characters have a misunderstanding and they are unable to communicate how they really feel towards each other. So my friend and I were talking the other day about this trope, and it really made me remember just how much I don't like it, and I feel like I need to do a whole video talking about it because there's a lot of stuff that we can deep dive into about this trope. I feel like a lot of the time it just comes from this really petty and jealous reason, and it really just creates a lot of unnecessary drama in the book, things that I don't necessarily want to see because a lot of times there's so many other things going on that are more important. However, that being said though, there are a couple of times that I actually really like the use of the miscommunication trope, and I am going to be discussing that a little bit today, as well as again all of the reasons as to why it's not really a great thing in YA books. The communication trope I find oftentimes occurs in the second book of a trilogy, and a lot of times at this point in the trilogy, the characters just simply don't know enough about each other to really know what the other person is thinking, how the other person will react to something, how they feel about something. So a lot of times this causes conflict. And you'll see in this video that a lot of the books that I mentioned, the character just thinks of this worst case scenario in their head and then reacts as though the partner is actually doing that worst case scenario instead of understanding and listening to what's really going on around them in the present moment. And then oftentimes this makes the other person really confused and conflicted and like, what's going on? And this causes a lot of drama, and half the time I feel like this could end up making the relationship and the interactions feel really petty. So just a quick warning, there will be spoilers for every book that I talk about on this list. However, you can just simply skip over the book that I'm going to be talking about. I'll have a little picture of the book that I'm talking about on the screen, and also includes timestamps in the description. These books are not going to overlap at all. They just all have one very common theme, and that's really what I wanted to touch on. This video will be split into 3 categories, and they all span from miscommunication that originates from jealousy and from a petty reason to where it actually is used in a good way and where I actually find it very effective to the overall story. The books where miscommunication originates from a petty jealous reason, primarily because the characters just don't know enough about each other yet. As I was saying earlier, this most often occurs in YA trilogies, mainly because the characters often meet in the first book, and by the second book they haven't been with each other long enough to really know what the other character wants. So the first book that I think really falls into this category is Insurgent. This is the second book in the Divergent trilogy, and this is one of the first times I ever saw the use of this trope greatly impact a book series. I read this book 3.5 years ago, so honestly I don't remember it that well, but I do specifically remember in this book, one of the main characters, 4, was being so incredibly petty the entire time. This was mainly because he would get so mad at Tris, the other main character and also his romantic partner, every time he said "I love you" and Tris did not say it back. By the way, they only knew each other for like a few months whenever this book took place. This I remember just absolutely driving me crazy because there are so many bigger issues to be dealing with in this book, and sometimes the only thing that 4 really cared about was this. It also made it seem like half the time 4 didn't even listen to her and just brushed off the fact that maybe "I love you" was just really difficult for her to say. She had just been through all of this other stuff. She watched her parents die, so naturally she's going to be dealing with that trauma. 4 was just so petty in the sense that he almost didn't understand that and was just like, "Oh, you're not saying I love you, so therefore we're not a good couple, therefore we need to break up." I remember he would get frustrated at her every single time she says something other than those 3 words. And this honestly just caused massive amounts of drama between them, and I remember it just taking up the majority of the book. These two just simply never listened to each other. I can't even tell you the plot of this book. I just solely remember that there was so much frustrating miscommunication in this book, and I remember it just driving me crazy. So the next book I want to talk about that falls under this category is Prodigy. This is the second book in the Legend series. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love this series, and what I'm about to talk about really does not affect my overall love for it that much. However, if you read the Legend series, you know that Day and June really only know each other for about a month by the time this book takes place. This is again another second book in a trilogy. I will say that part of the inability to communicate in this book did come from the fact that June was indirectly involved in the killing of Day's mother. So that was a reason why they weren't getting along very well. However, The miscommunication did also stem a lot from jealousy. This is primarily due to Tess and Andon. Tess and Andon are the rival love interests with Day and June. It is like Day and Tess and June and Andon. I honestly like to call this book forming some sort of love square. They would both get so mad at each other when the two prospective love interests made a move on Day and June respectively. And to be honest, the jealousy just made their relationship seem very petty throughout this book, and it really prevented them from being able to work together as a team and to be able to actually communicate in an effective way. I feel like a lot of times if they would have just talked to each other instead of getting mad at the other over this stuff, I feel like many of their problems in this book would have been solved. The book's where miscommunication still occurs out of jealousy and pettiness, despite the fact that the characters have known each other forever. So I actually really only have one book for this section, and this book is Siege and Storm. This is the second book in the Grisha trilogy, and I guess despite the fact that Alina and Mal have known each other forever, they are still a fairly new couple, so this can cause some uncertainty and result in miscommunication, as we see a lot in this book. Really, a lot of the time, this miscommunication stemmed from Mal just simply being jealous over Nikolai and Alina. Despite the fact that he had known Alina forever, he clearly did not trust her to be able to resist Nikolai's charms, when it was kind of obvious, at least to me, that for the most part, Alina just saw Nikolai as a friend and ally. Now granted, there are a couple of Nikolai-Alina scenes later on, however, Mal, I don't think ever really found out about that, and if he does, this was like way past the point where he was already jealous, so I didn't really take those much into consideration when thinking of this. This miscommunication does also stem from Mal just not feeling like he's good enough for Alina, but I really think this just further increases his jealousy since Nikolai is a prince and later a king and very clearly very well suited for Alina. Honestly, if they would have just listened to each other better and if Mal would have stopped letting his emotions get in the way of their relationship, I feel like they would have been much better off in this book. And I actually do really like Mal in the Grisha trilogy. I don't want this to come across as in that I don't like Mal. However, I can't deny that he was being a little bit petty in this book. Miscommunication trope that is actually used in a good way. This occurs mostly with enemies to lovers, as you'll see in these two books that I'm going to discuss. Now, I feel like the miscommunication trope, when it's enemies to lovers, it can actually be used as a really great character developing moment because these characters have been enemies for so long, so they never really learned how to actually communicate with each other. So really it just shows a lot of character growth and development whenever they actually eventually learn how to do that. So the first book that I'm going to talk about in this category is The Wicked King. This is the second book in the Cruel Prince trilogy. This miscommunication really does not originate out of pettiness, but rather a misunderstanding of how Jude interpreted Cardan's exile of her. I actually really like this one because the drama that these two have throughout the whole trilogy is actually really entertaining, and it makes perfect sense as to why they would not be able to understand each other's intentions. Especially because, as we know in the series, in the Fae world, that because Cardan is a Fae, he is unable to lie. So anything that he actually says and does is truthful. So therefore, it would make perfect sense as to why Jude would misinterpret the exile, why she would actually believe the exile. It really is the ultimate betrayal, especially because they also just got married. And this whole issue is originating over one miscommunication, over one little misunderstanding in this book. So I actually feel like it really gives a lot of character development to his character later on, and I do really love the use of it in this book. The final book that I want to talk about that falls in this category is Wayward Son. This is the second book in the Simon Snow trilogy. Throughout the entirety of this book, Simon and Baz are unable to communicate and tell each other pretty much anything. However, the thing that I like about this one is not because they're jealous or being petty with one another, and granted, Simon does get jealous of Lamb a little bit later on in the book, but their miscommunication started way before that, so I didn't really take that into consideration at all. Both of these characters are simply just so fragile, and they both have so many inner demons that they are fighting. Simon is suffering from this deep depression that he's been in for a year and a half at the time this book takes place, and Baz is dealing with his own identity crisis, being a vampire and dealing with his family, all that stuff. Not to mention, they also went from being enemies to boyfriends overnight, and they never really learned how to communicate to each other in the past. They spent the first 7 years of knowing each other, of being roommates, pushing each other downstairs and tying each other's shoelaces. They never learned how to have a meaningful relationship whatsoever. And the thing that makes their miscommunication in this book so heartbreaking is that both of the times they are afraid that if they actually vocalize what they are thinking in their head, that they're going to shatter what they have with each other, even though the reader knows that what they are both thinking is so beautiful and it is nothing along the lines of, I want to end this relationship. And this is actually a time where I feel like this trope is used in a way where you never question their love for each other, but instead the use of this trope makes you more sure of it than ever before. This is incredibly heartbreaking to read about, and honestly, I kind of wish that I had a reading vlog chronicling my experience reading this book, because the entire time, for once, it felt as though the miscommunication was not being born out of pure jealousiness or pettiness. It was being born out of, if I talk to my partner, I will mess this whole thing up, and I really don't want to do that, so might as well just not talk to him at all. I honestly could make an entire video about the complexities of Simon and Baz's relationship, so please let me know in the comments if that's something that you would want to see. I just love these characters so much, and I could go on and on about them, and there really is just so much to talk about here. The miscommunication trope can most of the time drive me crazy. I don't understand why the need for unnecessary drama occurs in books so much. However, in the end, it's not all that bad at times. When executed the right way, this trope can just break my heart and make me feel so much at the same time. And I really wish that more authors and more books would do it like Holly Black and Ray Morales do, because the use of the trope in those two books, it really enhances the characters versus just making them feel petty. So thank you so much for watching, and please let me know what you think about this trope. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Are you somewhere in the middle? And I will see you later. Have a great day, everyone. Bye!